All right, well, welcome back. Last week we had a lot of fun with the great challenge to justice from the problem of the myth of the ring of Gyges. We imagined this fellow Gyges who had found a magical ring that turned him invisible, and we found out that he used it to seduce the queen, kill the king, and take over the kingdom, and then, of course, he's allegedly lived happily ever after. And we wondered about that. I mean, do you get a Disney ending when you commit horrific injustices, right? Or does something just not sound quite right about that? Because if it really is the case that you could, if you had an invisibility ring, get away with murder, then maybe instead of reading the Bible, we should be reading Machiavelli's The Prince, right? Instead of pursuing justice and goodness, maybe we should just pursue power and leave, church for, the losers. The people who can't cut it anyway. And the rest of us who have the wherewithal go for power, right? I mean, that's the question. If you really could get away with being bad, why bother with goodness at all? And so we forced ourselves to embrace that challenge to see whether that's really true by asking ourselves, if we had such an invisibility ring, what would we do, right? And we used the example of the bank and the bank vault, and we said, would you take the money if you had the ability to invisibly enter the bank and then walk out with as much of the money as you liked? And we were raising this big question. Is justice, remember we're talking here about justice of soul, not like a social justice or criminal justice, not a group justice, but the individual justice of the person, like a just man, a good man, a morally righteous person. Is justice necessary for happiness? Because the idea, of course, if you're going to go into a bank and steal the money and you think you can get away with it, the assumption is the money is going to contribute to your happiness. If it turns out that that's not true, then you made a big mistake right from the beginning, right? So is justice necessary for happiness? If justice is necessary, then stealing money from banks will never make you happy, no matter what. And so all the people that went to the side of the room, I think it was this side, and thought that, yeah, let's take the money. This is the question for you. Are you really going to be happy? But a lot of you said, no, I'm not going to be taking any money. I'm staying on that side. So then we pushed you a little bit harder, right? And we imagined a situation where all the rewards associated with justice are put on the unjust man. Remember, he got the ring, he looks good. And all of the penalties associated with injustice are put on the just man. And so in the end, you were subjected to all these tortures, recriminations, loss of reputation, right? And then we said to you, is justice worth it? And there the question was this: is justice enough for happiness? Is it sufficient? What is the connection? And we realized that an awful lot of the question comes down to what is happiness? Right? And we saw at the end of our last class that people today have this idea that happiness is whatever they want it to be. Right? How dare you impose your happiness values on me? I'm offended. And we tested it. Remember the drum roll? I crossed this line because that was my definition of happiness. And suddenly I was happier than a person on heroin. And you were all very skeptical. Right? You don't buy it. You're like, you're not happy. You're an idiot. Right. Happiness is not whatever we want it to be. Happiness is the greatest thing. That's why we all want it. Do you really think it's as easy as crossing lines? Do you really think that you can impose your will on reality and make happiness whatever you want it to be? Not likely. Furthermore, is happiness getting whatever we want? Remember the example of the Christmas tree? The kid, write the list. If I just get all these things, I'll be happy. And what does that last? 2 weeks? 2 days? 2 hours before the next list gets written? Right? But we're not much better, are we? We just have bigger lists. Then we get these things, we're not happy, and we're like, well, I guess I need to write another list. Well, why doesn't it work? So, we really need to think carefully about what happiness is. It does not seem to be getting whatever we want. It does not seem to be relative to the individual. So what is it? And if we can figure that out today, then we will be able to answer this question. What is the connection? So when you're thinking about happiness, you're thinking about the good of a thing. What is the thing that fulfills human beings? You realize that that's going to be different for the different kinds of creatures. So for example, if we were talking about rabbit happiness, right, you would say rabbits probably need carrots. Seems reasonable. A nice hole free of foxes, right? That would be a rabbit. Or if you were an angel, presumably your happiness would have something to do with weightlessness, floating, right? Presumably, I'm not an angel and I've never met one, so I'm not sure. But it's certainly going to be different than what human beings are, right? We don't have tails and big ears. We do eat carrots. We don't float, but like angels, we can think. There seems to be some commonalities and some differences. So to really get at what human happiness is, we need to understand what human nature is. Why? Because the happiness of each thing corresponds to what it is. The happiness or the good of each thing corresponds to what it is. So if we can just get an accurate understanding of what makes human beings tick, then we will be able to identify what the good or excellent human being really is. Right? We do this in other activities. If you want to know what good flute playing is, for example, right, you don't go and look at the rules for bassoons. If I give you a bassoon book, you'd be like, yeah, I said flute. I'd say, no, it's relative. It's, it all works. You'd be like, no, that does not work. I want to know what good flute playing is. Don't give me bassoon rules. So for good human beings, it's not going to do any use at all for me to give you a guide to being an excellent angel or a guide to being an excellent rabbit. It must be a guide to being an excellent or good human being. Everyone understand? And since the good of a thing is its best state, and happiness, we all know, is our best state, that's why we want it so much, if we can identify what human nature is and what the good of human beings is, then we will know what happiness is for human beings. Then we can tell if justice is linked to it or not. Everyone understand the mission? Questions? Everyone on board? All right, let's find out. Nifty, huh? Okay, so to figure out what we are, we should probably contrast ourselves with what we're not, and then we'll be able to figure out the difference. So let's start with the biggest of all possible things. Who's the biggest of all guys? Put him right on top. Being Catholics, you probably have an idea. That was a little hint to help you out. Biggest of all possible beings? Look at that. All right? And what is God? Speak loudly. Okay, he is almighty, meaning he's infinite, and of course he's perfectly good, perfectly loving. All right, what kind of being is he? Is he composed of rocks? No. How about leaves? No. So what is he made out of? What is God, according to his nature? Spirit. All right, spirit. And that's, of course, the term we use in theology. And if we weren't in theology, we were doing philosophy, we would just say mind. So very important whenever you're using theological language to be able to put it in the language of everybody else. Okay? Spirit doesn't mean a thing unless you're into voodoo culture, right? Or you're Catholic or something, or you're one of those ghost people. But normal people don't know what spirit is, but everyone knows what mind is, right? A thinking thing. And God is an infinite mind. Notice there's no matter in him. No matter. Just immateriality, immaterial mind. Now, if there's an infinite mind, wouldn't it follow the next being down would be what? Finite mind. Right. And beings who are pure spirits and also lack matter what do we call them? Angels, well done. And now you can see what we're up to, right? We're trying to lay out the possible beings to figure out where we fit. Now we started at the top, so now let's go all the way to the bottom and work our way up. At the very bottom, the least kind of stuff of all, what would you call that? What's that? Speak up. Matter. If that's too complex, rocks and gases and all kinds of other stuff that composes matter. All right? Good. Matter. Because we know this stuff's up here is immaterial, meaning not material. This stuff down here is composed of matter. And of course, of the material things, would you not agree we can divide them into those that are living and those that are not? So we call this not living, inanimate, right? And then up here, we're going to have the animate matter. Oh, this is starting to look really nice. We're getting it all laid out. Okay, bottom level inanimate matter. Lowest possible stuff, but at least you're alive. General category, plants. All right, next level up. Better than plants? Animals. All right. Good. And of course, these things are also finite, obviously, and non-mind. As long as we're careful about our definitions. Obviously, animals have experience, right? Animals can reason, the higher ordered ones. You know the story of Chrysippus' dog? So one day Chrysippus is out there with his dog and it's chasing a rabbit, right? So the rabbit goes around a bend and the dog loses sight of the rabbit. Dog races around, Chrysippus tries to get up, catches up to the dog, and there's the dog, and there's 3 trails. Okay? And the dog smells trail A, looks up, no rabbit. Then he sniffs trail B, looks up, no rabbit. And then, this is what's interesting, without sniffing trail C, he launches down trail C. How did he do that? You say, well, A or B or C, not A or B, therefore C. Isn't that logic? Yes, it's logic. It's called the disjunctive syllogism. You say the dog does logic? Yes. Dogs can do logic. Okay? So by mind, we don't mean that sort of really basic reasoning. What do human beings and angels and God do that no animal ever does? 3 things. What are they? Give me one. Okay, cooking. It's actually a really good example. Cooking. Cooking is an art. We would put sculpting in there too, wouldn't we? And mowing the lawn. Crafting. All these kinds of arts. Included in the arts are things like poetry. Animals don't do poetry, do they? When did you ever go to a reading by an elephant? Doesn't happen. You say, yeah, but I was at a circus once and an elephant painted. Yeah, but what did he paint? Only what they paint today. I venture to say no elephant has ever compared to Michelangelo's painting or Raphael's, right? You're like, that's true. Yeah, which suggests that painting today a little too much like elephants. Interesting question. Is it art? For another class. All right, art. What else do we do that no animals ever do? What's it out? Shout it out. We reason? Well, we just saw the animals can reason in the most basic sense of logic, right? What kind of reasoning do you have in mind? Excellent. Moral reasoning, right? Morality. Correct. Because just as art makes use of a universal image, right, like the rose is an image of beauty, right? We form the concept by the image. The same thing is true of morality. I say, well, you're a creature just like I am. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I work up the universal concept, and I say, you're a creature like I am, therefore I should treat you like I wish to be treated myself. Same kind of mental operation of looking at the universal concept and then applying it. Animals do not do that. And the last example, of course, science. where again, we seek the universal concept. Animals know certain kinds of things do certain kinds of things. Obviously. We know that too, right? You know that if you eat dandelion soup, this happens to you. But at some point, somebody says, why does dandelion soup do that? And that somebody is never an ant, it's never a grasshopper, it's never an elephant, it is a human being. And then we look at it and we find the universal principle, why these things work, underlying universal principle. And so we call this capacity, not reasoning, we call it rationality. Technical and important difference. No animal is rational, but we are. God and angels are rational. This means we figured out something that we have in common with God and angels, but not the lower creatures. Which was our mission. Human nature is at least being rational. We've got part of it. So now we know what we have in common with them, but not down here. Now we have to figure out what do we have in common with these guys, but not up here. Anyone venture to make the argument? Correct. Angels and God are immaterial. Now we participate in the immaterial insofar as we have rationality. We have a spiritual part. But we also have a material part. Right? And we're not plants or rocks. We are, in fact, animals. Rational animals. And that is, of course, if you remember your old philosophy course from college, that is what human nature is. Rational animal. We are composed of two kinds of stuff. We are hybrids. Matter and spirit. Merged together in such a way that they're naturally linked. It's an extraordinary thing to be a human being. Now, why did we do all this? Anyone remember? You say, wait a minute, can't we just flip that board again? Oh, yes. We want to know what human nature was so we could solve this problem. And now we know. Human beings are rational animals. And we said if we knew what we were, then we could figure out what our good is, what completes us, what fulfills us, what makes us happy. So, it apparently has to do with our being rational and our being animal. So let's look at the rational side, and let's look at the animal side. What would you say is the science or art that studies how to be a properly functioning physical being, an animal being? So we would know what science or art to pursue. Biology? Biology is very broad. So in biology, if you're an appropriately functioning creature biologically, we call you what? When you fail in this, we send you to the doctor. That'd be you sick. So if you're not sick and you're not sick, we call you the positive? Healthy. There you go. So to be an animal and to be an appropriate animal, a good animal, an excellent animal, you need to be in a state of health. So first step to being a complete human being is to being healthy. If you've ever noticed, when you're dead, you are not doing well as a human being. Very unhealthy. Right? Step back a few steps from death, you're on your deathbed. Still not doing well. Right? If you get COVID and you're like, oh, this really sucks. Yes. Not healthy. Not the best state. You say, I cannot wait to be out of this state and back to normal. Because health makes us more on the end of being complete. So the first thing we realize, to be happy, we better be healthy. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. That's easy, right? That's the easy side. What about this rational side? So what do you mean by that? Well, consider. We think about being rational in at least two different senses. On the one hand, we probably want to be rational with respect to what we believe. And we probably also want to be rational with respect to what we do. Right? You don't want to be crazy. And if we're trying to get our beliefs to be rational, what are we seeking? What kind of beliefs? Do you think we want false beliefs or true beliefs? True beliefs. Believing false things will be unfortunate. And when we act, do we want to act well or poorly? Presumably well. And of course, well is a version of the word good. I'd say we're getting somewhere. To help our beliefs become true, you want to have good habits of mind, don't you? Right? If you can't do the kind of reasoning that Chrysippus' dog did, you're going to have problems in life. Reasoning is a good thing. When you're trying to live an ethical life, right? You need to have true beliefs. So we need habits, intellectual habits that are good for us. And an intellectual habit, a habit that is good for us, we call, anyone know? Speak up loudly.
Prayer.
Okay, that would be a very particular example. But yes, a virtue. The word virtue means a good habit. So in order to form true beliefs and be rational, we need to have intellectual virtues, because the system that believes is called the intellect. And we need intellectual virtues. You say, give me an example. How about wisdom? Do you think it's possible to be happy if you're a fool? I mean, Shakespeare gives us fools that seem to be happy, right? When you contrast them with King Lear. But generally speaking, that's counterpoint. That's counterpoint. Okay, so we need the intellectual virtues, things like wisdom. Okay, what about the action? The faculty that acts in human nature, of course, is our will. And when we're trying to act, we want to act well. We want to act for the good. And if we're acting well and for the good, what do we call us? Virtuous. And the virtue of acting well is called justice. And the kind of virtue is called moral virtues. Moral having to do with what we do, the intellect having to do with what we think. And the first of all the moral virtues, of course, is justice. So now you're seeing where this is going, aren't you? How can you be happy, complete as a human being, if you lack justice? How could you be happy, complete as a human being, if you lack wisdom? But there's more to us, isn't there? For we are not just believing in action things, we are also desiring creatures, aren't we? And desire is really interesting faculty, along with the will and the intellect. Because desire kind of participates in the rational side, but it kind of participates in the animal side. Both things feed into our desires, right? You say, yeah, I really like some chocolate cake. Well, that's a merger of your intellect, but also your body. You can't get chocolate cake without the intellect cooking it. But on the other hand, the desire for food in the first place comes from the animal side of you. We have a lot of desires. And what does desire seek? Satisfaction in pleasure and beauty. And so, here too, we need some moral virtues. What if we ate too much chocolate cake? Would that be good for us? So we need to temper that, moderate it, and so we have a virtue called temperance or moderation, which says, yes, desire, you want a lot of this, but maybe just one piece. Because the chocolate cake desire has no inherent limit. Right? The alcohol part of you, well, I guess it could be a part of you if you drink a lot. The part that wishes to drink alcohol, where's the limiting principle? You look at the bar, there's a whole slew of bottles. You say, yes, I would like that one, and I would like that one, and I would like that. Ooh, I would like that one. Ooh, that's blue. I would like to try that one. It's just desire. There's no limiting principle. And yet your mind is like, oh, whoa, how many have we had? How fast are we drinking these things? And so we need to moderate this desire. You understand? But also, there's another part. Sometimes we need to slow it down. Other times we need to speed it up. We need a virtue that helps us hold to what's good when our desires would rather us just run away. Right? Desire says, run, this isn't good. I don't like this. Fear. And so we need a virtue that holds against fear. And what do we call that? Courage, bravery, right? Fortitude. Okay, so our appetites, our desiring part, need two virtues. One, to slow them down a little bit, and the other time, to keep them moving when we'd rather not go anywhere. Two critical virtues. And of course, if you know your moral theory, you know that wisdom, justice, moderation, and courage are the four what? Anyone know? What do we call these four virtues? The cardinal virtues. Cardinal from the bird? No, from cardia, the heart of the matter. These are the heart of all the virtues. If you have these four virtues, every element of human nature is properly ordered and is excellent. And did we not say that happiness is being excellent in each area of yourself? Yes. So, now that we know what we are, now that we know what our good is, we can go back to the original question, can't we? Is justice necessary for happiness? Yes. Absolutely necessary. Never, ever commit an injustice. Do not take the money. Do not steal from your employer at work. Don't do it. You say, the reason I'm doing this is because I think this is going to somehow make me happy. It won't. It won't.